Okay, so I'm Rachel Greene-Lowell, and I've mainly been an event rider and trainer, but I've done fox hunting and the jumpers, and I now have a dressage horse that I'm working with. I have always been attracted to very sensitive, difficult horses, and I think those types of horses have just been very challenging for me, interesting for me. I like to figure them out and sort of help them reach their full potential. Biggest challenge for me was a mare I bought in '99. She was just exceptionally athletic, but very high octane, high energy. And she grew up in a field for 3 years, which was wonderful. She was strong. She'd had a very good childhood. But when I got her, she was a bit wild. And I wanted to be safe. I wanted to figure out how I could train her without getting bucked off. And so I enlisted the help of someone who did some natural horsemanship in the area. And so gradually grew to love that work and to see how it really benefited her in the long term, helped develop mutual trust and respect between us. So what I have found, and I wished I'd known this in my 20s, is really how to learn how to talk like a horse and how to move a horse around as if you're the leader of the herd. So the natural horsemanship really is all about softening the horse's body and then getting into the horse's brain and having them connect to you as their leader. So with this mare, Rue, I mean, for an example, I would walk into her stall and she would turn around wanting to kick me. So she was a real alpha mare, always the boss, and I had to figure out a way to become her leader. So the natural horsemanship gave me technique to use just to achieve those goals. And basically, you learn how to move their feet and how to soften them through their body by, they call it disengaging, bringing their inside hind leg up under their body and turning them, pushing them away, drawing them to you. In dressage, it's called engaging, so it's just a difference in semantics. But really, you're asking the horse to step up under themselves and soften through the rib cage and give to you wherever you are, so that if you walk towards the horse, they move away. If you pull away from the horse, they come to you. As a leader in the herd would do, they'll push the horses around where they want them. And I came to understand that every horse needs to have its place in the herd, whether it's at the top or the bottom, doesn't necessarily matter as long as they know where they fit in. And once they know that, then they can relax. I mean, if you look at the training scale, you're still working on those first three pieces with the groundwork, rhythm and relaxation, suppleness, and contact. And I find that if you don't have rhythm or relaxation, if the horse is tense, then you have nothing. So the natural horsemanship for me was really a starting point, no matter what type of discipline you're going into. It's the basis for everything. And it really helped me to understand why she would react the way she would. A lot of people, when a horse spooks at the same thing 10 times, they start losing their temper and get angry, which doesn't help at all. It really makes the matter, the situation more difficult. So I learned that the way you get around that reactive behavior is by giving the horse a job, making them think, asking them questions, moving them away, pulling them to you. And what it did was it built on sort of the classical training I'd had in lunging and long lining, and just added to that, so that if I have a horse that is very reactive, I can move them around to the right, to the left, as opposed to just letting them go crazy in one direction on the lunge line. So it gave me more tools for different horses, and especially for difficult thoroughbred mares, or I worked with a lot of race horses. So I find that this type of work really helps the horse to focus, and you can get much more concentrated training done in a shorter amount of time. But a horse that is relaxed is one that's licking and chewing. Their ears are soft, their eyes are soft, and they're focused on you. If they're looking to the right, they're looking to the left, then they're not totally focused on what you want them to do. Mm-hmm. So you need that connection. And horses having looking separately out of each eye, you need to, there's usually one side a horse will let you in and another side they won't. So you need to work on both sides of the horse so that they'll let you into each eye. So I think a lot of people have fear. And what this work helped me to do was reduce any fear I had around a very reactive horse and just give me more tools to understand why that horse was responding the way they did. And I think for many people, they believe that if you lunge the horse to death, in quotes, and you get them tired, then you have a horse that's controllable. Whereas my thinking completely changed on that, that if you get a horse focused on you and relaxed, not tired, but calm and focused, that's really the key, the missing piece. And how do you keep the horse relaxed and focused, but keep the horse from being exhausted and tired at the same time? So with the lunging, what I would do, and for some horses, the lunging works better. For other horses, moving them around. Every horse is a little bit different. I use both techniques with all my horses. If I have a horse that's very reactive on the lunge lane, I do a lot of transitions. Just so I move them away. I'll leg yield them out on the circle. However I can get them to move away from me and respect my space is where I need to start, so that then I start becoming the leader. With the groundwork, I use a flag and I use a thicker rope or a thicker lunge line. And I will move the horse's hind end so they actually turn their hind end away and face me. And then I'll make them stand and wait. I'll back them up. I'll change direction. I'll move them around all the time. And so basically I get to the point where I'm always driving them forward, which a lead horse would do in a herd. They'll drive the horses. The other thing I had to learn with the natural horsemanship is I had to know where to position my body. And I think that's a very difficult concept for people who are learning how to lunge and or do the natural horsemanship work. You have to stay pretty much near their hip so that you're always behind the shoulder driving them forward. And then the other benefit to a lot of this work is that it helps enormously with teaching horses how to trailer. Mm-hmm. And I've had incredibly difficult horses getting them on the trailer. So the benefits of the work really ripple out into all different aspects. My whole concept of trailering a horse has completely changed. Mm-hmm. And it's been much more successful. So there's just so much to talk about, but I think if you have a horse that is losing sort of their brain, or they're spooking at snow coming off of the roof in the wintertime, if you can move them around, back them up, bring them forward, get them so focused on you because you're asking them so many questions, then they start to relax and start just ignoring all the external stimuli. Mm-hmm. What you want to see when you start moving the horse around is that they'll start licking and chewing. They'll be moving their jaw and licking their lips. And that's the first sign that they're focusing on you. Monty Roberts, I saw a presentation by him through the SPCA, and he had said a horse needs to run for a quarter mile if they're afraid of something. They usually run about a quarter of a mile before they'll turn around and look back. And that just made a huge impression on me, that if a horse is afraid, you're just going to add fuel to the fire if you get angry or if you shank them with a chain. So that you have to keep them moving, and you have to learn how to control where their feet go so you don't get run over. So sometimes it can be, pretty scary. I had my mare in an indoor in the snow. There was a fabric roof, and I barely just got out of the ring to get her back in the trailer. So there are situations where if you have some technique and some things you can do, you're going to keep yourself safer. This method teaches one how to think like a horse and how to move a horse around you so that you become the leader. Not in an aggressive, angry way, because in a herd, the lead horse doesn't have to be angry. They're just assertive, and then they let go. So it's all about putting pressure on a horse and then softening as the reward. So in a barn aisle, I mean, I don't have an indoor arena. I've been iced in. If you have access to your trailer, that's a good way you can do a lot of trailer work. But in your barn aisle, you can lead your horse forward. What I do is I take the lead shank and just kind of rock it this way. And it's hard to explain without showing it. But you just push the horse back just by moving your energy through the lead line, and then it touches the ring and the halter. So, and then you walk towards them, and they have to softly move away from you and back up. Another big thing, and a lot of horses that have fear and have had to protect themselves, like many horses that have spent years racing on the track, they'll raise their heads, and that's a defensive and a protective movement. I've had many students, horses, who they could barely get the bridles on because the horses' heads are way up into the rafters. What a horse has to do is lower their head. So what you can do with the halter on, and I don't use a chain. In some circumstances, you might need a chain at a show with a horse that gets fractious. But I try to just use a big rope lead. Some people also use a specific halter that puts pressure on the nose. I just use a regular halter, but you pull pressure down so that the horse starts lowering their head. As soon as they lower their head and give you a little bit of a try, then you reward them. And what I've learned is that if a horse is willing to even think about it and soften just a touch, that needs to be seen and respected and rewarded. Because you'll start getting into their brain if you give them that positive reinforcement from the beginning. So it's all about the try, really. If they try, that's good enough. So ideally what you want to do is get to the point where you can put a little, barely even touch the halter. They'll lower their head right down. And then you can take the lead shank and with their head low, then back them up. And by doing that, they're stretching over their back, reaching, and they have to lift in their bellies as you back them up. So it actually is a top-line strengthening exercise, too. Mm-hmm. So they're not only softening in their body, but they're allowing you to move them around. So the forward and back, lowering the head all the time. There's a lot you can do in the stall by rolling them under, turning them around so that their hind legs come up under their body and they change direction. So when I walk a horse into a stall, I always turn them around and ask them to step under and cross that inside hind leg in front of the other hind leg and then face me. And then move away from me. I'll pull them towards me. I'll also do this by their eyes and move them. If they move away from my pressure, just with moving my hands, you can feel just the energy of your hands moving them away. If they step to the side, then you reward them. So they always have to move away from your pressure, whether you're touching them or not. They can feel you just pushing against them. It's like having somebody sit a little too close to you that you don't know. You can sort of feel that you want to move away, and that's what they feel too. So there's a lot you can do. It's hard to not show it with a horse, but once you can see it in action, it really makes sense, and it's actually very simple. Well, I was very fortunate in that I have a cowboy that lives down the street, and he worked with Buck Brannaman. So his training has been, impeccable from the beginning, because Buck really was one of the movers and shakers of this whole understanding and movement. Buck was abused as a child, and he took a lot of his trauma and really related it to horses. learning how to understand horses, how to get them relaxed and focused without being aggressive and violent, which is really what a lot of the training was years and years ago when there was very little understanding. Ray Hunt, I mean, there's so many. In no way am I an expert on this. I've just had the good fortune of working with somebody who's worked with Buck, and there's a wonderful movie about Buck. So I think once you start researching, you can, gradually increase your own knowledge about the subject. My introduction to natural horsemanship was not positive. So my mare, Rue, who was pretty impossible to deal with on the ground, I took her to a woman in the area who had worked with a natural horsemanship trainer, and she had a small indoor area round pen. What I found very difficult was that whenever the horse didn't do what she wanted, she would run the horse around until it got tired. And then out of just being tired, the horse would then give in. And for me, it was like, okay, this isn't what I want. This is like lunging a horse on the line for an hour. So it's just exhausted. And my mare came back with big legs and sore and achy. I said, okay, I need to find another way. And that's when I found Warren Meyer down the street. And what impressed me first, I said, okay, I'll give this another try with him, is he said, I'm not going to make her do anything she doesn't want to do. If she wants to gallop on a circle, she can do that. If she wants to walk, she can walk. It's her choice. But what she does have to do is move her legs where I put her. She has to respect and move away from me. So that just made a lot more sense to me. I think you can work with someone and you'll either know if that's the correct person or not, and how relaxed and steady and strong they are in their training, in their practice. So, and then you just look at the response of the horse. The horse I have now that I'm working with, a dressage horse, he's a Dutch Oldenburg, and he had very bad training for many years. Came to me as an extremely angry, big, powerful horse. And he's a huge mover and a bit intimidating. So I spent a good 5 months just working him on the ground. He'd had a year off because he had behavioral issues. And I brought him to Warren, and Warren completely figured him out. But this horse would try to charge me on the line and constantly challenging me and testing me. And I really had to learn, okay, how do I deal with this? So I learned a lot. And that work on the ground directly translates to riding, because once you can soften the horse and they trust you, then getting on their back is really very similar, because you're moving them now with your leg and not necessarily with your physical body. You can move them away on a leg yield. You can roll them under. When you get on their back, horses being prey animals, you're sitting on their back where a tiger would be trying to bite their neck. So when a horse allows a rider to sit on them, it's really a huge act of faith. And I think that often gets lost in the shuffle, especially with younger riders, that we're asking these horses to relax and soften and give us their bodies so that we can move them around the ring. And I think there's a lot to that I didn't understand as a younger trainer. So the natural horsemanship has just been an addition to everything else I've done. It's sort of helped me connect with these horses on a different level, on a more of an emotional level, I would say. If you're having a really bad day and you're frustrated and angry, or for whatever reason, don't ride and try to do something. Don't do a jump school, don't do a dressage school. Get on and go for a hack, or do your groundwork, because those are the times where whatever mood you're in, the horse is going to pick up on it, especially the sensitive ones. The last one is allow the horse to be who they are. If you have a horse that is intimidating and too much for you, maybe you need to have the hard conversation that it's not a good match. This horse, Abe, that I've been training, is a huge mover. And he was held together for so many years that a lot of his resistance and anger was that he just couldn't, he wasn't allowed to sort of be and move the way he was meant to move. And so I think that's a huge piece, is just allow a horse to be big and expressive if that's what they are. And my mare Rue, I couldn't contain her energy. I had to learn how to work with it so that she could still express herself and be an amazing athlete, but also be focused and calm with the work. The way you can get to their brain is by softening their body. One expression that Warren, the cowboy, uses is he or she is all wadded up, which is a good expression. You think, just tight. And I find, especially with the warm bloods, that this horse that I've been competing, he's got a lot of fear, and he wasn't taken out on the trails as a youngster. He's 11 now, and so he does have the tendency to want to go up. And so I find that if I work him in the ring on the ground and I ride him and I loosen him up, I can take him anywhere. But if I try to just get on him and make him go somewhere, it's just not going to work. So at some point you've got to, for your own safety, you need to sort of, figure out how far you can push a horse and how you can get through a difficult situation that will change the way the horse thinks. I grew up thinking, you've got to make them go, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And sometimes you need to have a different approach with, horses that have had trauma, or especially with mares. You have to discuss, you have to negotiate. You're not necessarily going to dominate, and you have to find a real way to connect to them where they're going to respect you. I love the Disney movies, but in many ways, animals are just personified. It's like we transfer our human reactions to an animal, to a wild animal, and expect them to respond that way. And I don't think that does us any favors, especially, with horses. They work in a tribe or a herd differently than people do. And you need to learn to understand those differences so that they're not frustrated, you're not frustrated, and you can both be safe. So, that was another thing. A lot of kids grow up thinking, there are a lot of horses that are unconsciously abused, not through, being beaten up, but by being misunderstood. So there's confusion on their part. My daughter will walk down to the barn, and my mare Rue, she's just always got her ears back. And she goes, "Oh, she hates me." I said, "No, she doesn't hate you. You're just in her space." And she protects her space. So, just teaching kids what that really means and why horses behave the way they do. I think for me, that's where the groundwork just said, the light bulb went off. And they said, okay, this is what's going on. And the other thing about it is that I think of people and horses and every living thing as just a big ball of energy. And so when you're working on the ground, and this just became very apparent watching Warren work with my horses, is that what you're doing is you're just pushing energy away and you're pulling it towards you. And when you ride, you're organizing this big animal filled with energy, and you're shaping their bodies, you're creating energy, you're pushing it forward, you're collecting it, you're lengthening it. So if you think about it that way too, that your physical body, your horse will pick up your energy. So energy is a big piece to it. And the more sensitive that you can be around your mood, how you connect, if you're relaxed, if you're calm, the horses are going to respond to that too. That's a huge piece, I think. If somebody could just go watch a clinic. So that's another thing, is look up where are their clinics. I know Buck Brannaman doesn't do as many now, but there are many online clinics. There's educational tools online. There are a lot of resources that people can access. So, and just it's increasing our knowledge so that we become complete horsemen and women. And by doing that, our training is going to benefit.